So I've been a part of this community now for a little over 5 years, and I feel the love so much. Recently, many of you know I lost my father in the physical. He passed away October 30th, and the way that this church has surrounded me and supported me with love and prayers has been really remarkable. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of my entire family for that. What we teach in Unity is that the soul is eternal. We don't know exactly what that all looks like, but I will tell you that I'm beginning to feel my dad's presence in interesting ways. He suffered from Alzheimer's there at the end, and it was so we've been in grief a long time. And this Thanksgiving was hard, but it was a bit of an interesting thing that we noticed. My friend Joe Dickey lost his mom last year, and she had been ill a long time too. And he said it's a blessing. It was a sad blessing for us in that he's no longer there at our Thanksgiving table, but a joyful blessing for him that he's free. And there's nothing clouding his heart and his mind now, and I just feel that connection. Karen Tudor, who is a former senior associate minister here and now the minister at New Braunfels, at the end of her memorial services, she says it like this: he didn't go anywhere, he went everywhere. And that's what I believe about my dad. So just thank you for the support. Thank you for your love, and I love you. Now, I want to talk about Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving weekend. If you're not done being grateful yet, I think I have a few more things I'd like to share about it. Irma Bombeck, she says this about Thanksgiving. Do you remember Irma Bombeck? Yeah. She says, no one diets on Thanksgiving. What we're really talking about is a wonderful day set aside on the fourth Thursday of November when no one diets. I mean, why else call it Thanksgiving? Johnny Carson said, Thanksgiving is an emotional holiday. People travel thousands of miles to be with people that they only see once a year, and then discover once a year maybe too often. And Reba McEntire says this: to succeed in life, you need three things: a wishbone, a backbone, and a funny bone. I like that. So we've been talking about, actually Reverend Jean Marie gave a wonderful message at our Thanksgiving service on Wednesday night, and Reverend Howard talked about it last Sunday as well. It's how do we continue to be in a practice of gratitude and seeing that God is present when it doesn't feel good. I mean, you had rain coming out of your ceiling, right? She had a pipe burst in the ceiling of her kitchen, and she talked beautifully about how we can give thanks in all things, but not necessarily for all things. And that's what I'm continuing that conversation today. The talk is called Seeing Good Everywhere. This is what we believe, and this is what we teach in Unity, that we are one with the one life, the Spirit of God itself, and we teach certain things about it, that it is omnipresent, it is omnipotent, it is omniscient, and it is omnibenevolent, meaning that God is everywhere present and everywhere good. But has anybody else had a period, I don't know, of a year or a decade where it didn't feel too good? Where you struggle to kind of feel the goodness of life? It can be, we go through seasons of pain and struggle as human beings, even people in Unity. I mean, it would be great if we just when you show up for membership, it was like, now it gets easy from here on. That would be, boy, this church will be full today if we had that one. But that's actually not, we don't teach that life is meant to be easy, do we? But what does Reverend Howard say all the time? Life is meant to be good. Is it possible to see the good everywhere, even when it's hard? Well, if you already know that, then I guess you're done. See you later. I'm going to share with you, because this has been a struggle for me. This has been a big part of my growing up into spiritual maturity, is learning how to see the good everywhere, even in times that are difficult, in times of struggle. So I'm going to share with you three things. There are three different texts that I went to today to bring you the message. And the first is from the book of Job in the Hebrew Scriptures. And the message that I got from that story is that perspective heals. The second text we're going to is in the Gospel of Matthew. It's also recorded in the Gospel of Thomas, the Gnostic Gospel, but it's the parable of the pearl, when Jesus talked about the pearl of great price. And the lesson that I'm going to hope to draw from that and share with you today is that we have to release the lesser to gain the greater. And then lastly, I'm going to the Course in Miracles. And that beautiful teaching shows us, and I'm going to share with you today, that it must begin with me. That to be this process of seeing the good everywhere has to begin within. So have you ever heard the phrase, he has the patience of Job? Yeah. You know that? Job is one of those weird old stories, and I like sharing those weird old stories with you. There's something about them that I grew up in a church where we heard the Bible stories a lot, and so they're familiar to me. I hope to bring a little bit different perspective on it than the one I grew up with. There's a saying, I say this quite a bit, but it just still feels alive in me to say it this way. The Native Americans have a tradition, before they share one of their great stories, they say this: I don't know if any of this is true. No, let me say that again. I don't know if any of this happened, but I know it's true. And so we're not concerned about whether this Job was a factual person that lived and had these experiences. There's something in the story that has been told for thousands of years that has meaning and truth and life in it for us today. So let's just I'm going to take you through it. It's a very long book. It's 40-some chapters, and I'm not going to read them all, and I'm not even going to tell you about all of it. We're going to kind of get to it. It's an interesting book from a literary standpoint, too, because the beginning and the end just kind of tell the story, and it has long, long passages of poetry in the middle. But here's the deal about Job. He was a righteous man and lived a beautiful life. There's the adversary comes to God. Now, I want you to know that in Jewish theology, there is no devil, like some of the evangelical Christian traditions would hold, that there is a power for evil called the devil. That's not actually true in Jewish theology, and it's not true in unity theology either. But in the purpose of this story, the adversary, some would say may have been a fallen angel. He came to God, and he argued with God that there's nobody good on the planet. And God says, hey, check out Job. He's doing good. He's a good man. He's very righteous. And the adversary says, yeah, but that's because you've given it to him too easy. Look, he's blessed. He's rich. He's got this wonderful family. He's healthy. You took some of those blessings away, and I bet he wouldn't be so righteous. And God said, you're on. And they had a contest. Seems like a very kind of strange God that would do this, but all right, it's a story, right? So then, the way that these things happen was kind of interesting, the way they're portrayed too. The first thing that happens is he loses everything. It says one servant came to him in the afternoon and said, oh, it's a terrible thing, but we have been beset by enemies, and they have killed all your oxen and asses and all your servants, tending them. I am the only one who escaped, and I've come to tell you. And while he was still telling that story, another came up and said, the same thing happened to your camels. And it was like this. So there were 4 messengers that came to him at once and said, you've lost everything. The last messenger said, all of your children were gathered for a celebration in your eldest son's house, and a great wind came upon the 4 corners of the structure, and it fell and killed them all. That's a lot of bad news to get in one afternoon. And you can imagine that Job must have been devastated, that all of the earthly good, including not only his prosperity and his abundance, but also his children, the great loves that he had poured into his family, they were all gone. And yet he did not curse God, and his faith remained strong. And so the adversary came back to God, and God said, see, I told you. Good guy, that Job. And he said, yeah, but let's do something. Give me another crack at him. And so the story goes, as it's told, is that God said okay, and I don't know if he said okay, but God gave permission, and then Job was afflicted with boils over his entire body. And this some sort of a skin thing. It was very painful and awful, and they said that the only thing he could think to do, I guess they didn't have good dermatologists back in the day, he sat in the ashes and scraped his skin with pottery. Does not seem like that healthy a thing, but that's what he did. But he was in a lot of pain. You get the idea. It was so bad, his wife came out to him sitting there and said, better you should curse God and die. I mean, I've had experiences where things went from great to okay in a period of a few days, but I've never had a period like that where everything is perfect and then everything falls away. I've come pretty close a couple of times, but not to this degree. There's that idea, the patience of Job. It's actually a bit of a misnomer. If you actually look in the text, he's not patient. He does not like that this is happening, but he is faithful. He is faithful. So when he's in this sad state, he has 3 friends that come to visit him. And it says the first thing that they do, they don't even recognize him because he's in such a different state, that they see this terrible situation that has come upon him, and they sit with him, and they don't say a word for 7 days. Sometimes have you noticed that when someone in your family or friends, they've had a loss and they're hurting, we want to find the perfect words to say to them, Do you know how powerful it is to just be with someone who's hurting? To just be present in the midst of that kind of grief and pain. That's sometimes the best thing to do. People would come, when my dad died, people would come with lots of carbohydrates, chicken and noodles and pastries and pies. My Aunt Margaret asked me she said, honey, I never get to cook for you. What kind of pie do you like? I said, I like pie. And she's like, well, I said, I really like cherry or maybe pecan. She came with two pecan pies and a cherry pie just for me. So that's the way she showed love. But there were no words, you know what I mean? And that's kind of what we're saying here. But after the time of silence, they did begin to speak, and they began to criticize a little bit old Job. They said, well, maybe you weren't as righteous as you thought, or why would God let this happen? Maybe you weren't doing it exactly right. Maybe you should be doing something different. And for chapters and chapters, they give their sort of arguments about why this is going on. Why do the good suffer? Why do bad things happen to good people? And they all give sort of their earthly perspective on that. And Job, when he gets a chance to speak about it, he's not necessarily patient. He says things like this. He said, it would have been better for me to be carried from the cradle to the tomb than to experience life like this. He talks about, we'd use light and dark sometimes as like spiritual metaphors, that the light represents the good and the possible and the hopeful and the faithful, and the dark represents our separate mind or our error thought or things like that. Well, he talks about the dark is better now because the light just illuminates my pain. Sometimes people can't come to church and be around all this joy and this love and this light when they're hurting because it just feels too bad. So Job is not doing great. It's not some triumphant stand up and tell your testimony story. He's suffering. And finally, God says, that's enough. And he takes him up in a whirlwind, it says, and shows him the vastness of creation. There are chapters talking about, he said, Job, you haven't seen the doe give birth to her new fawn. You haven't seen what I know. And he shows Job how big the picture really is and how small his suffering is in comparison to the goodness of God. And that perspective is what heals him. That he began to see that his pain is temporary and just one small part. I did an exercise with my Lessons in Truth class a couple of weeks ago where I had taken a beautiful image and I'd focused in on one part and I blew it up and I gave them these images of this small little part of a picture. And I asked them, what did they notice in this? And you really couldn't tell what a lot of them were. And my friend PJ, she had one. It was a dark little image. It had some leaves, but it was very dark. And she said, I didn't like it. So I put it back in the stack and pulled another one. I got the same one again. And it felt dark and brooding somehow. But then when I passed out the whole images, and they were able to see which their little part was a part of a bigger image, and hers was of this beautiful forest scene at twilight, and there was all this light coming down in this glade in the center, and she had one little dark corner of it. And that's the way life is sometimes. What we're experiencing is not the story, it's a chapter. So the first thing I offer you to move into this idea of seeing God or seeing good everywhere is to know that when it doesn't feel good, it's not the whole story. And perspective can heal us. The second thing I'd like to share with you today is from Matthew chapter 13, verse 45 and 46. Jesus said, Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. And when he had found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. Sometimes the parables of Jesus, these wonderful teaching stories, they're great stories, like the prodigal son. There are characters and there's development and there's action. They're just wonderful stories to listen to. And then sometimes they're almost like these little riddles. In the Zen tradition, they're called koans. They're little questions that the Zen masters would ask their students that don't have an answer. Like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? What was your face before your parents were born? These kind of mysterious things, but they're not meant to have solid answers. They're meant to open us to a new perspective, a new reality. And I believe that this message, this parable of Jesus and the great pearl, that's exactly what he's trying to say. There may not be one answer to what this means, but here's what it brought up for me. I've been inspired. I've had a little bit of a revelation around this for me, that The pearl of great price. It's one thing that is worth everything else. What would that be? Well, he already told us it's the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant who searches for the one thing that he would give all else for. What it means for me today, and I'm just going to share you, this is my commentary on the gospel. My mind can get so divided. I can be giving my allegiance in so many different ways. I can be looking for my good from so many different things as my source. I can be so identified in different ways that really have nothing at all to do with the kingdom of God. And what if I could let it all go and trust God for everything in my life? What if I could live like that? What if I could live in that space of knowing that no matter what happens, good is being revealed here? That no matter what is going on in the world, I know that God is still large and in charge. What if I could live like that? Would I not give everything to live in that awareness and to live in that experience? So I think for me, what the pearl of great price is an awareness of unity teaching. It is an awareness of oneness. There are not many powers, there is one power. And if we can release all of our lesser truth and step into that great truth that God is all there is, what it would do to all of those times and all of those experiences of pain and struggle. If we said, yes, even here, the life of God is active, alive, available, and moving, what would happen? Well, I'm going to invite you all to take up this challenge to live this way, but I'm just going to give it to you in one area. Did you notice we had an election this month? You noticed? Our country is more polarized and divided than it has ever been, according to the people who track these things. They have values polls for the voters, and the values of the two candidate supporters have never been further apart. And it's become really easy to see the world, and particularly our nation, as us and them. Now, in unity, we could just pick a side. We're just going to go, well, we're going to be part of this side. But is that what our name implies? Is that what our teaching would call us to? Is that the pearl of great price in how to live as a citizen of this nation? What we're called to do is to release the idea that there's any them. It's all us. And I don't know how this was at your Thanksgiving table. We just didn't talk about it in the God household. But in this church, what I'm inviting us into is a conversation on how we include the excluders. There's again, I don't know for the origins of this statement. Someone said it may have been from some Native American tradition, but it says this: someone made a circle to keep me out, so I made a bigger one to include us all. Our temptation is to separate and exclude. Love calls us to join and include. So how do we include those who don't want to be a part of our circle? Who don't want to see us as one, who want to see us as us and them? How do we do that? I wish I knew. It's a big question. It is a very big question. But it's a question that I'm asking us to take up. We began a process last month here at Unity called Healing the Heart of America, which we're beginning to look at those things in our culture, in our country that divide us, and sing, what is mine to do in all of this? Thank you to Cindy Wigglesworth and Tracy Brown for leading that first dialogue, where the next iteration of this work is called, it's a class called Justice, on the book by Michael Sandel. It's coming up in January. How can we stand together for the good of all in our country? Social justice is an important issue. Another thing that came from that first dialogue we had on Healing the Heart of America was that we had a survey, and the most highly rated or chosen response from that survey was, I want to be a good ally for those groups who are not receiving justice in our country. How can I be an ally for the LGBT community? How can I be an ally for the African American community? How can I be an ally for the immigrant community? How can I be an ally for these groups? And so we're going to be offering time to time some members, activists, and different people from those communities to come in and teach us how we can all come together. And if there's a group that we're not getting, tell us. This is not about us and them. This is about how we can create a greater experience of us being unified. And it's not about a political party. It's not about how you vote. It is about how we love and how we live. And that's what we're about at Unity. We are a mystical Christian tradition. We see oneness, not division. So that is the pearl of great price that I'm inviting us all into. The last thing I want to share with you today is a quote from the Course in Miracles. It says this: "See the love of God in you, and you will see it everywhere, because it is everywhere." And good night. Drop the mic. See the love of God in you, and you'll see it everywhere. Well, there's the answer. I think we can all go home, right? That's it. Just see the love of God in me. All problems are solved. Why is that the hardest place to see it sometimes? Why is it? Because you know your history. I know my history. I know all the times that I have tried to see the love of God in myself and I have failed. I know all of those false beliefs and limited ideas that I have inherited from my childhood and the family of origin and the religion of my upbringing. I know all of this that I carry that would say, who are you kidding, the love of God? What do you mean? No, it's an us and them. But if we can begin to apply and begin to see and live from that pearl of great price, the love of God here, then we see it everywhere. This is the essential teaching of Jesus. In Matthew chapter 7, it's one of my favorite passages. He says, "Judge not, lest you be judged. It is in the same measure that you judge, that it will be judged unto you. Before you remove the speck from your neighbor's eye, remove the plank from your own." It's the same principle. We're seeing out there what we see in here. And it's hard. It's hard to change the way we understand and experience the love of God as our very life. We're challenged by our kids. We're challenged by our boss. We're challenged by all of those things. We're challenged by a diagnosis. We're challenged by so many things that it becomes so hard to see the love of God as my own life. But this is our work. This is what we are called to do. Who do you believe yourself to be? What do you believe yourself to be? Michael Beckwith says that all of our work in spiritual growth and evolution is subtractive. We're not here to add any new principles. We're not here to add any new learning. What we're here to do is release those limiting and false ideas of who and what we are. Because who and what you are is the love of God. You don't have the love of God. You are the love of God. Hafiz was this amazing, crazy poet who lived in Persia in the 1300s. This translation is, even though they didn't have some of these phrases, I'm sure in Persian, but it's meant to capture the irreverence in the idioms that he would have used in his own poetry. He says this: "You are the sun in drag. You are God hiding from yourself. Remove all the mine, that is the veil. Remove all the mine, that is the veil." Why ever worry about anything? Listen to what your friend Hafiz knows for certain. The appearance of this world is a magi's brilliant trick, though its affairs are nothing into nothing. But you are a divine elephant with amnesia trying to live in an anthole. Sweetheart, oh sweetheart, you are God in drag. One more. This is called lousy at math. Once a group of thieves stole a rare diamond larger than a goose egg. Its value could have easily bought 1,000 horses and 2,000 acres of the most fertile land in Shiraz. The thieves got drunk that night to celebrate their great haul. But during the course of the evening, the effects of the liquor and their mistrust of each other grew to such an extent they decided to divide the stone into pieces. Of course, that which was priceless became lost. Most everyone is lousy at math and does that to God. Dissects the indivisible one by saying things like, "This is my beloved, he looks like this and acts like that." How could that moron over there really be God? And how could we be anything but the expression of life's own love for its nature, for its experience? You are here to reveal God's love. Thank you for doing it with me in this community. I love you. God bless you.